They didn't scream when they realized they were going to die. Not at first. There was no dramatic outburst, no heroic speech, no sudden rush of courage, just a silence that spread between them. A silence that felt heavier than the enemy closing in. Because in that moment, before the bullets, before the fire, before the final breath, they all understood something most people never do. This was the end, and there would be no escape, only a choice of how they would meet it. The wind that morning carried dust instead of hope. It swept across the broken landscape like a whisper from something ancient, something that had seen this before. Too many times, war had already chewed through this place. Buildings were reduced to skeletons. Roads were no longer paths, just scars across the earth. The sky itself looked tired, dimmed by smoke and the residue of violence. This wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a grave waiting to be filled. And in the middle of it, a small group of men stood, unaware that history was quietly tightening its grip around them. They weren't legends, not yet, just soldiers, tired, undersupplied, far from home. Some of them hadn't slept properly in days, others hadn't eaten enough to feel human. Their uniforms carried dust, sweat, and the faint smell of fear that no one talked about, but everyone recognized. At the center of them stood a man who didn't look like a hero. Because real leaders rarely do. His face was lined, not from age but from decisions. The kind that don't leave room for doubt. The kind that stay with you long after the noise is gone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to, because the situation spoke louder than any command ever could. They were outnumbered, not slightly, not even significantly, overwhelmingly. The kind of imbalance that doesn't leave room for strategy. The kind that turns plans into illusions. And yet, they stayed, not because they believed they would win, but because they understood something deeper. If they left, everything behind them would fall. Families, cities, lives that would never even know their names. And so the decision wasn't about survival anymore. It was about time. How long could they hold? How much could they delay the inevitable? How many lives could be saved by their deaths? That's what a last stand really is. Not a fight for victory, but a negotiation with time itself. The first signs came quietly, a distant rumble, almost mistaken for thunder. But there were no clouds in the sky. Then came the vibrations, subtle at first, felt more than heard. The ground itself reacting before the eyes could confirm what was coming. And then the horizon shifted, not visibly, not dramatically, just enough. Just enough for the men to realize they were no longer waiting. The enemy was here. There's a strange moment before battle truly begins. A pause, a fracture in time where everything feels suspended. Breathing slows, sounds sharpen, thoughts become painfully clear. And in that moment, people don't think about glory. They think about home, about unfinished conversations, about faces they may never see again. About all the things they assumed they had more time for. One of the soldiers reached into his pocket, a small photograph, edges worn, slightly bent, a family. He stared at it not dramatically, not tearfully, just quietly, as if memorizing it wasn't enough, as if he was trying to hold on to it physically. Another checked his weapon again, even though he had already checked it 3 times. Not because he didn't trust it, but because control, even an illusion of it, was the only thing keeping him steady. And the leader, he simply looked forward, eyes fixed, not on the enemy, but on the reality that was about to unfold. Because leadership in moments like this isn't about giving orders. It's about absorbing fear, taking it in so others don't drown in it. The first shot didn't feel real. It never does. A sharp crack that breaks the silence but not the disbelief. Then another. And another. And suddenly the world snaps back into motion. Chaos doesn't build. It arrives. Explosions tear through the ground, sending dirt and debris into the air like violent confetti. The sound isn't just loud, it's consuming. It fills every space, every thought, every instinct. Commands are shouted but barely heard. The air becomes thick with smoke and urgency. And the enemy keeps coming, wave after wave, relentless, unstoppable. It becomes clear within minutes this isn't a battle that can be won. It's a battle that must be endured. And endurance has a cost. Time begins to warp. Minutes stretch into something unrecognizable. Every second carries weight. Every decision feels final. A soldier falls, then another. There's no time to process it, no time to mourn, because survival, temporary as it may be, demands attention. The leader moves through the chaos like a shadow, not untouched, but focused. He sees everything, the cracks forming, the exhaustion setting in, the fear rising. And yet he says very little, because words are fragile in moments like this. Action is what remains. But even action has limits. Supplies run low. Ammunition becomes something to ration, not rely on. Each bullet now carries a decision. Each shot must matter. And that realization, it changes everything. Because now it's not just about fighting. It's about choosing when to fight, when to hold back. When to let the enemy get closer than instinct would ever allow. The distance shrinks. The danger intensifies. And still they hold. Because falling back is no longer an option. There is nowhere left to go, and then something shifts, not on the battlefield but within them. The fear doesn't disappear, it transforms, it sharpens, becomes something else entirely. Acceptance. Not defeat, not surrender, but clarity. They understand now, fully, completely. They are not going to survive this. And strangely, that realization doesn't break them, it frees them. Because when survival is no longer the goal, something changes in how you fight. Hesitation disappears. Doubt fades. Every action becomes absolute. There's no tomorrow to conserve energy for. No future to protect. Only this moment, this stand. This final line that cannot be crossed. The enemy feels it too, even if they don't understand it. There's a difference in resistance now. A stubbornness that defies logic, a refusal that doesn't match the odds, and it slows them, not completely, but enough to matter, because time is still being bought, second by second, minute by minute, with blood, with breath, with everything they have left. A soldier, barely more than a boy, finds himself alone behind a crumbling wall. His hands are shaking, not violently, just enough to remind him that he's still human. He reloads slowly, deliberately, each movement controlled, because panic would waste time, and time is all that matters. He looks up, sees the enemy advancing, too close, far too close, and for a brief moment he smiles, not out of joy, but out of understanding. This is it. This is where his story ends, not in comfort, not in peace, but in defiance. He stands, fires, and doesn't step back. Elsewhere, the leader feels the shift, the thinning numbers, the growing silence between gunfire. He doesn't need a report. He already knows they're reaching the edge, and so he makes a decision, not spoken, not announced, but understood. This is the final stand, no more holding back, no more conserving, everything now. What follows isn't a battle, it's something else, something raw, something almost primal. The last fragments of resistance colliding with overwhelming force. There's no formation anymore. No structure, just individuals choosing to stand, choosing to fight, choosing to matter, even as the world around them collapses. The sounds blur together, gunfire, explosions, shouts, silence. It all becomes one continuous wave, and within it, moments. Small, fleeting moments that define everything. A hand reaching out and not finding anything to hold. A voice calling a name that no longer answers. A breath taken that becomes the last. The leader finds himself at the center of it all. Alone, not physically, but in responsibility. He knows what this means, what it has always meant. And yet, there's no regret. Only a quiet acknowledgement. This was the cost, and they paid it willingly. The enemy breaks through, not dramatically. Not all at once, but inevitably. Like water finding cracks in stone. And when they do, there's no retreat, no fallback, only confrontation. The final moments are not heroic in the way stories often describe. They are messy, brutal, real. There's pain, confusion, fear that still lingers even at the end. But there is also something else. Something stronger, resolve, because even in those last seconds they don't run, they don't surrender, they stand. And that changes everything. The battlefield eventually goes quiet. Not immediately, but gradually, as if the world itself is catching its breath. The smoke lingers, the dust settles, and what remains is stillness. A heavy, suffocating stillness. Where moments ago everything existed, the enemy moves through the aftermath, carefully, cautiously, because even now there's a sense of unease, not fear but something close to it, respect. Because what they faced here wasn't just resistance, it was defiance in its purest form. And that's the thing about last stands. They don't always change the outcome of a war. They don't always lead to victory. Sometimes they end exactly as expected, with loss, with silence, with names that fade into history, but they change something else, something harder to measure. They alter the narrative. They redefine what it means to fight, to stand, to choose purpose, even when the outcome is already written. Because in the end, a last stand isn't about winning. It never was. It's about refusing to disappear quietly. It's about drawing a line, not because you believe it will hold forever, but because it matters that it was drawn at all. Somewhere far from that battlefield, life continues. People wake up, go about their days, unaware of what was held back, unaware of what was given. And maybe that's the point. Because the greatest sacrifices are often the ones that allow others to never even notice they were needed. But history remembers. Not always loudly, not always clearly, but it remembers. In fragments, in stories, in the quiet spaces between what happened and what could have happened.